I was just
Sure, tell me who's talking.
I can hear
Yeah, because the music's on.
it. I was
It's
saying
loud as mess though. Oh, this is how you adjust your audio levels right here too. So you just go to the audio panel and just adjust recording. So these are right here. These are the laws right here, and then this is the actual hack right here. I right now have it muted.
I legit might take a nap in my car. I literally might just have the AC on and just like go to sleep. But
Kev, if I move these chairs up, is it still okay? All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. How's everybody feeling? We're good. So good. Did you all enjoy the food? Awesome, awesome. The chef is still here, so if you all see her around, her name is Crystal. Make sure you all give her some kudos. She actually just recently started her business not too long ago and grew it during the pandemic. So we're really happy that she was able to help us out. So we are doing the church and movement discussion today. We have the Johnsons, Reverend Nelson and Mrs. Joyce Johnson, who are going to be I mean, clearly the music wants to play. Clearly the Lord just wants to come on through my a wonderful discussion. I heard the discussion this morning has already been going really well. And we wanted to make sure that we really facilitated a time for conversation. So we have an hour allotted for our time together. We're gonna, just get into it and flow with it and see where the conversation goes. So before I bring up Josh and the Johnsons, I'm going to play a video for you all to see. Tiara, can you find out about turning the lights down here? Like how to do that, please?
All right.
I want to see if we can turn the lights down so you all can see a little bit better. But yeah, we'll do the video and then I'm going to bring them up and hand it over for a great discussion. We do have our interpreters here. Is there anyone who is in need of interpretation services this morning? Okay. All right, perfect. So I'm going to start the video and then I'll introduce our speakers for today and turn it over.
the extraordinary contributions they're making in their encore careers. Nelson and Joyce Johnson win the 2008 Purvis Prize.
Awesome. Next in my order, I would like to welcome Dr. Vincent, Executive Director of Southern Vision Alliance, and Reverend Nelson and Mrs. Joyce Johnson to come up.
First of all, thank you for coming today. I'm extremely excited about this particular conversation. The whole weekend has been amazing. And Reverend Johnson and Mrs. Johnson and Joyce Johnson are it's just an honor. I'm almost speechless about the fact that we're able to sit here and share space with such critical, quintessential parts to movement work in North Carolina, and getting a chance to share with everyone in the space and have an opportunity to be in discussion. This first video here just gives me so much to think about, and I'm almost like, man, we can also actually immediately open up the questions, right? And also thinking a little bit about some of the conversation that we had earlier this morning, and also over the last couple of weeks. I wanted to first give you all opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about the work of the Beloved Community Center that we saw kind of highlighted here, the Truth and Reconciliation work that's happening currently across the state, and kind of what that means to you in the longer term relationship to the movement work that's critical for North Carolina and the South.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody I did not get a chance to speak with, and good morning, I understand, to our church family, Faith Community Church, where our senior pastor, a friend of all of yours, Reverend Wesley Morris, is the pastor. I understand that they are here online as well, just writing back to them. But if you would indulge me, we talked about the arts last evening, and whenever we enter a space and speak of what happened to our dear friends, really to all of us in 1979, I have to do a bit of a spiritual transition. So join me if you are so moved. I feel like going on. I feel like going on. The trials come on every hand. I feel like going on. I feel like pressing my way. I feel like pressing my way. The trials come on every hand. I feel like going on. And I sing that to myself as I was sharing with Kristen earlier. I'm not a singer, but I sing. And I sing to gather my substance, my strength, my remembrance, but my will to move forward, particularly in this day and time when we see so much, and you're seeing so many things that I thought at age 17 you would not have to see. When I decided that by age 25 I would have ended racism and sexism and all those things, and then in a few years finish medical school, get married, have a couple of kids, and make $12,000 a year. That was my aspiration as I came in 1964 to Duke University with very few African American. I think there were 3 students there before I arrived in '64. And at 75, I'm a few years off my schedule, but I'm still moving forward. And the folk who were killed in '79 were not just revolutionaries, young at that time, but dear friends. They were friends as well. But so I have to reach down because the story, it doesn't stop me, but I do have to reach into that essence to keep going on. And Josh, I do not remember the question you raised, so I hope that Nelson does. We now share a brain, so I'll switch over to him to see if he wants to respond to your particular question. And we're looking forward to spending some great time with you, because this question of, let me just add one piece. I think it was the church or the religion and the movement. For us, it's beyond any particular religion. It's really a deeper question of spirit. And spirit overcomes color, gender, even economic divides, all those things. Language divides. It's the deepness of who we are if we're fully human. We're really more than these bodies that we carry. So when we were honoring the ancestors yesterday, that's about the spiritual connection. That's what fuels you, what drives you to really build what we call the beloved community. Those of us who practice Christianity, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So I just want to say that, so because it's so easy to get divided up about, well, I don't go to church or whatever. I can remember a brief period I didn't go to church because I just thought that what we were doing in terms of building the movement was more authentic than what I saw in some church settings. But then I was like, that's pretty arrogant of you. Who do you think you are that you know everything? Which I did not. And so it's something that's deeper that drives us. I hope that we will be able to enter that deep to deep place as opposed to just about, the church has done a lot of things, still does a lot of things that are not good. But that is the church. That is a human form. That is not the essence of that spiritual peace. But it's hard to see that when you've been harmed by the church because of your gender. You've been harmed by the church because of the way you want to practice. You've been harmed by the church because of the way you sing or whatever like that. But then those of us who are really led to make social justice changes are going to need something more than just earthly tactics. It is inadequate. So, Nelson.
Let me say that I've been greatly blessed by being here yesterday and hearing the insightful teaching, remarks, questions. And I do feel that among one of the most pressing questions in our culture that is experiencing a tsunami of falsehood washing over the land is, how do we find qualitative truth? How do we grow qualitative truth? How do we allow that truth to connect us over the wounds of our yesterdays and to build a powerful transformative movement? I still hear the words, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Oh, yes, yes.
And actually, we have to believe that that potential resides within us. But potential is potential until it is transformed into actuality. Theoretically, that was and is the mission of the church. I am sad to say that the church has not done well in recent time with that mission. And I wanted to point out there is no perfect church to start with.
Say so.
and that there will always be flaws and faults in it. But the church that grew out of slavery is a different church than the church today. Way down yonder by ourselves, couldn't hear nobody pray but us. That was the bush album. The churches where people went into the woods, cut down bushes and trees, and went under those to commune with the God of their creation. And they were looking for a way out of slavery, and actually played a major role in helping to end it and to set the country possibly on a different course. But in less than, 11 or 12 years, objectively, the spiritual vision growing out of that work was overthrown as objective slavery was reintroduced. And prisoners had no right and could be worked for nothing. And they formed chain gangs. And I've seen them up and down the roads. And people could put you in jail for nothing, for walking while it's dark, being on the wrong side of the street.
Yes.
And actually it became a source of free labor. And that's part of the story, part of the journey. But I do want to say that the black church played an important role in struggling against that. Actually, it was so important and powerful that in 1973, a man named Jerry Falwell kicked off another movement which redefined the mission of the church and has become what is generally referred to as the right-wing church. You've heard of the moral majority. And I want to urge you and to plead with you not to confuse the church that wrote on the words that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, and hearing to those who have been deaf in their capacity to hear and feel a deeper mission, and to give sight to those who are blind, and this profound statement to set at liberty all who are oppressed. That was the first sermon that Jesus preached. Never confuse Jesus with the church.
Amen, amen, amen.
What do you make of that teaching? How do you set free all who are oppressed? You have to actually build the power to do it. And part of that power and the anchoring part of it is being deeply rooted in a spirit that says it can be done. At the point that you disbelieve in the possibility, actually you get into a different game. And so in some sense, non-church people have to grow their own spirituality and have to grow their own determination. I was blessed to hear what people are doing, and it doesn't have to wear a label saying we the church.
That's right.
It does have to carry the substance of affirming the dignity and the worth and the enormous unrealized potential of all of God's children. We have to bridge the deep ditches of division and walk toward each other anew, believing that one day, if we stay with that, we'll be able to walk together. And when we walk together, that's when we have transformative power.
That's right.
That's when we can't be played against each other. And that actually is baptized into a deep spirit that may be connected to a church, but it may not be. It's a universal spirit. So I want to encourage you not to give up on the spirit because the church might be waffling. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, let's keep on doing it. I do want to say this. We've had a fairly good experience with the church in Greensboro. should I say, a corner of the church. And that we've been able to pull in people who were vacillating and helping them to see beyond the cultural blindness imposed on them just by growing up in the nation itself. And to see a little bit of what was being talked about when Jesus preached his first sermon. And when we find at various places in the book, let me just say this and then I'm going to stop because if I don't, I won't. There's a story about the Hebrews who endured 400 years of slavery and who got hooked up to that spirit and wouldn't give up and found their way out. And a man raised up a stick, and the book says that the waters receded and the folk walked over wet places on dry ground into new possibilities. But after they got out there, they started milling around and talking smack against each other. And gradually, Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments. By the time he came down, they had melted the gold and built them a God. And I'm afraid that this nation has built itself a God.
Yes.
And I don't want you to get mixed up between that God and the God of our transformation and salvation. And we may have to go back to the bush house. We may have to be in rooms like this. We may have to be in the basement of houses. And there's a corner of the church that can be pulled into this if we go at it in the right way. And so I don't want you to totally dismiss the church, but the church is wounded. But sometimes it at least takes a little healing salve. I want to tell a brief story. I have every major struggle we've been in, we've been able to involve the church, a piece of it. And it has been helpful. Most of a lot of what I talk about are the ones that went well. I want to talk about one that didn't, because it's the most recent one. We had a lot of problems with the police. The agent in the lead truck that led the Klan and Nazis into the parade site was paid by the police. His name was Eddie Dawson. And you saw the shooting. You saw the killing. And they framed it. And by the way, naming and framing is key.
Yes.
If you don't name what you're doing, and that's saying what it is, and if you don't frame it, which is the context in which it's happening, and anything out of context loses its meaning. So I just want to point that out. Name and frame what you're doing and hold the context out there. But they said that this was a shootout between two equally abhorrent groups. And they went before juries, and all white juries said, we agree with that outlook. So that's part of our story. It's not the story I want to dwell on. I was talking to Letitia a little while ago. Where is she? Okay. These masks kind of make things difficult nowadays. I'm used to people trying to rob me with a mask. But there was a young man. He was Latinx, Jorge Cornell. And we met him because he was leader of something called Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation. I don't know if anybody heard of that, have you? It's a street group. Some people call them gangs. We don't use that language. It's meant to devalue people. And we worked with him. They were abusing him, locking him up, and then writing articles about him. But with that work, we pulled together 5 street groups. I can't name them all, but the Crips, the Bloods, the Almighty King and Queen Nation, and different groups, with red rags or blue rags in their back pocket, actually seeking meaning in their lives. And the meaning was to actually conquer somebody else or abuse somebody else. But we got together with this young man and pulled together a black-brown conference after the victory of Smithfield workers, where we went down there and at night when ICE came in on them, about 500 black workers, 500 white workers, and we had a statewide black-brown conference. And Jorge participated in that. But when we pulled together these 5 groups, meeting in the park and walking around in the woods somewhere, they said, we don't want to meet together where we will be seen because we'll be taken down. Because I had raised, let's go to a church and sit down and so we can be warm, and not out here in the rain and all this. They said, we ain't going to no church. Police will be all over us. So we got the 5 groups together, and I went to a church, Reverend Head, big church, and said, we've got people who need to talk, but they don't know where to get together in a way that we can be comfortable. So how big is your Sunday school class? He said, I got a big Sunday school class. I said, well, you're going to have a bigger one, because we want to mingle with your Sunday school class. And he said, who is it? I said, it's a bunch of young people straining to find their way. And I think that you've been preaching the way, so why not we come to your house? He said, that sounds all right to me. I said, well, we got to go in a different room, because we had a little bit of different take than what's in the Sunday school lesson. So we mixed up with this crowd, and we went on in. And the Sunday school people said, who are all these new people in our Sunday school? No, don't worry about it. Y'all go that way, we go this way. We pulled together a peace treaty. The Crips, the Bloods, the 5%ers, all were in there. And Jorge was leading it, a beautiful young, and we proposed a paradigm shift. Instead of seeing youth groups as evil and anti-justice, they can be a source for justice. They can bring together people in these communities that these people you harm running around not being in relationship with people can't do it. They can do it. And we actually convinced them to do it and took the paradigm shift to the city of Greensboro. The mayor, who was black, agreed with it. The city manager, who was white, said, I don't know, I have to think about it. The police chief jumped on it and pounded on it. And then they turned this whole thing into an attack on this young man. And I grieve today, because I talk to him once or twice, at least every month. He got 28 years for trumped up charges. This is one that we lost. And I am determined to do all I can, 28 years. But I still want to say that the church at least played a role in trying to get out of that. It played more substantial role in some of the other struggles. But let me stop, and I think just hear your questions or concerns or yours or who's ever.
No, please. Thank you so much. This is so full, and I feel like this is actually a good place. Before we go to questions, though, I know a little bit earlier today, this morning, you mentioned a little bit about these kind of 5 points of not necessarily focus, but 5 points in relationship to, I guess, worker struggles and your work as it relates to the Beloved Community Center. And I wondered if you all can talk a little bit about that. I know you talked a little bit about the Kmart struggle, and I'm wondering if that can be an inspiring place for a little bit of that conversation. Is that
Okay,
right?
that's fine. I'm not sure what y'all talking about, so you start.
I'm not sure either, but we were talking. I'm never sure what we were talking about. But after a while, I thank God for after a while, things clear up. I was sharing that last night I listed 5 struggles that we won. And today I shared one that we didn't win. Because you get joy out of sharing the ones you won. The pain comes back, because I think about going A every day. One of them was the Kmart struggle. Kmart was the largest retail store in the nation in the 90s. It built a hard goods store that serviced 5 states in Greensboro, some 7 or 8 football fields in size. And they brought in the workforce, quite a bit of it Latino, the majority black, and about a significant number of whites. And they used it to pay people $5 less an hour than they were paying 11 other regional distribution centers. And in some sense, they came to Greensboro because this is a right to work law state and you can get away with stuff. But people start complaining. And they came to the Beloved Community Center, and I wanted to get the church involved. So I took a brother, a pallet had fallen on his shoulder, and his shoulder was out of whack. And I went in to meet with one of the leading pastors and said, these are workers, and they're building a movement, and I think the church should be a part of it. And he said, well, where's the leader of the union? I said, well, the office is in New York. He said, I don't know, we can work with someone with the headquarters in New York. And I said, New York ain't no different from here, same thing, you know. So he mumbled around for a while, and I said, listen, the headquarters in New York, but these workers are in this community. And an injustice to anyone in this community ought to be an injustice to everyone in this community. He said, well, you know, you got a point. And so we said, what are we going to do? And they had something called the GGO, which was the Greater Greensboro Open. It was like almost Passover in Greensboro. Where in the springtime, big golf tournament, everybody come, all the men and women out there dressed in their spring finest, and they're out there, and all over the country, you know, people looking at it, it was a big deal. And the workers went out on the 18th hole and sat in, and it just blew everybody's mind. So they dragged the people off and put them in, and the judge actually said, I'm giving you all a deferred sentence, and I'm going to let you go. But if you ever do anything even close to this, I'm going to activate the active sentence. So they decapitated the leadership. And it's at that point that I went back to the clergy and said that, do you see what just happened? These young people bravely stood up. They've been jailed, and they've been put into a position that their families and everything would suffer if they go back out and play the role they played. And so I have a suggestion. They said, what is it? Let us play the role. And they said, ooh, we got to pray about that. That's what people say. So, but we said, go ahead and pray. But we met 2 or 3 times, and I was saying, it is a sin for people not to be paid, to be abused, to be hurt, and the church is silent and not saying anything, not doing anything. So people waffle to the line of justice and said, we're going to do it. And so we said, we're going to block the door of the largest Kmart store in the city. And all the clergy are going to come. It was 19 of us. 4 or 5 didn't agree. But we sat down in front of that store. And when we did, other church members sat down with us. And actually, we all went to jail, and the workers were standing up on the hill clapping. You know, and so we built a relationship there that was enduring. And the sheriff came and said, get these preachers out of my jail. They're stirring up the whole community. So Reverend Wright said, I've never been to jail. I said, well, you ought to go down there because a lot of your folk are down there. You can have church right in jail. And we almost did. And they said, isn't this so-and-so, isn't this this? Yeah. So what you doing here? We said, what you doing here? So we had a discussion. We built relationships. And when we came out of jail, actually people were committed to that struggle and it resulted in winning the best first contract in the history of North Carolina for over 500 workers. The key to it is you have to push your way into a stubborn church and preach your own gospel. And it corresponds to the book that they are familiar with. That's one example, and almost every struggle I can name, something like that had to happen. That you can't just ask them and they say no and you leave. Fight with them. Push with them. And learn a little bit about the book yourself. You know, I just quoted a scripture from Isaiah that Jesus quoted, and when he said to set at liberty all who are oppressed, how does the church deal with that? You know, so that's just another example, but I must stop here because I want to hear your questions and concerns.
I think this would be a great time to ask some questions. Are there folks, I know there's probably lots of questions, but are there any questions that folks have right now?
Thank you. I guess I run a coalition in Mississippi to end corporal punishment in public schools and charter schools. Vicariously, I'm also pushing into the home. I see the church as having a role. How do we push our way through? Because oftentimes scriptures are misquoted, they're misinterpreted. But I need clergy to recognize our children have human rights, and I want the church to because I think it is our spiritual responsibility to say we will not tolerate violence against children. Brown, black, and white children.
That's right.
We gotta free our children, but the church plays a major role. And as a black woman, Mother Johnson, you know how the church will receive me when I go and talk about that. So how do I push our way into getting clergy at the table and being responsive to the needs of our children?
I'll respond first. You want to respond?
Okay, what did you say? You want to respond first? Sister, you already defined one of the pathways. The other mothers in the church. Yes. And we do things like recalling for us that there were 3 women who went to the tomb when everyone else had given up and proclaimed the good news. We remind people of the earthly way in which Jesus the Christ even came to us through a young woman. So there are many ways, and the hearts and minds of mothers, we're not perfect either, but that is often a way to go. And any good pastor, from my perspective, having been married to a pastor before and all that, really has strong members, strong believers and actors around him or her, or they, and have to learn to rely on the strength of God's people, because it's not just ordained clergy persons, whatever faith, who have the Spirit of God in them, but the believers. So folks often misname me reverend as well. I said, no, I'm not a reverend, but I am a believer and a follower. And that strength is just as good. So use or employ the support of the other women to push, all the stories in the Bible that are really deep about the roles of women. But we know that the social constructs are that we would diminish women. And we women diminish ourselves, no matter how we became women. Some of us transformed into women after we were born into this world. But I've often said to people struggling with those inequities, think another way. This is part of how I've dealt with. Whether it's correct, I don't know, but it's worked for Joyce. I've said to a few, to me, misled men who think that they are superior to me just by reason of their birth. And I say my heart, and I'm not lying, my heart grieves for you if you really think that you're superior to me. And that's not an arrogant statement, but I was created by the Most High and have flaws for sure in this earthly form, but so many strengths. And so if you have to spend your whole life trying to prove that you abandoned me, that must be a heavy burden for you, brother. Because you're not. I know it, and you know it too. But you live in this lie of as if you are stronger than me, and that's just a heavy burden. That's true for my white brothers and sisters who are burdened by white supremacy. To have to believe in this hierarchy of human value is a burden. And that's why you do so many. I mean, look at what happened in Raleigh. I don't know the story of that young person that they said killed 5 folks. But I know there was a lot going on inside that mind and that heart. So people act out in many ways. But claim our strengths as women and do what we must do. That's part of what we've done and still trying to do more of in the triad area of women. It's like Dolores Porter and like Fannie Lou Hamer. Join our forces as we're raising families and all that to also raise our voices through voting. Voting is not a panacea. Y'all know it. Sometimes we don't even have good people to vote for. But we need to exercise our power so that we know it and other people know it and then hold people accountable. But I would go to the women first and of course always inviting the men.
Could I ask what city you're from?
I am from Mississippi. I'm from the state of Mississippi.
The city of Mississippi.
No, I'm from the city of Durant, which is central Mississippi.
Right.
Durant.
And the state of Mississippi, 18 other states in the south, including where I'm sitting now.
Yes.
Okay.
Still use
Corporal
state
punishment.
sanctioned violence against children.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
in schools.
Gotcha.
Even at home, even the way we have come through enslavement, Jim Crow and segregation, the relationship we have with our children needs to be redefined.
That's right.
It needs to be
That's right. And the reason I raised the question, you got to figure out a starting point. If you're in that town, that's part of the starting point. But there's some clergy person who might not know that he or she is ready to move out of the unresponsive space they're in to a new ground. And I would be, if I went there, I would be asking around, who is that? And actually, once you, and enough people will say something to indicate that there's somebody who is trying a little bit more than others to preach an authentic word, but may not be doing much. Slide up beside him with your group and name what you're trying to do. And then push a little bit on how anti-spiritual, how anti-church, how anti-righteousness it is to whip up on and devalue and hurt children. And the question you always would raise is, what would Jesus do? Because he said he called the little children to him. And the people want to shoot the children away. Get out of here. We have no grown folks meeting. You just do it, and all I'm saying is I'm giving tactics, You're in a place, there are churches in that place, they're not all the same, some a little bit better than others. Shop around, pick one, and then ask him to get 3 or 4 more preachers who might lean in his direction just because he's a preacher. and start to build from there. Those are tactics. Like George said, that women do more to sustain the church than men. Men try to get on the deacon board and be seen and run their mouth and so forth. But the groundwork is generally done by women, and pastors don't want to lose that. So I just want to offer those as a little bit of tactical, strategic guidance. Any other question?
So my question is just on how do you balance social justice and being a reverend, or is it just two things? Is it combined? And does it become overwhelming at times? Just what's your motivation? And yes, I know it's God, but what does that routine look like when you get tired?
Let me just say, there is no gospel without social justice. It doesn't exist.
That's what good news is. Yeah.
When you say, set at liberty all who are oppressed, what does that except social gospel? And never equate what one or two preachers are saying with what Jesus said. And in that way, you get anchored beyond the culture. I had two books, one called Slavery Defended and Slavery Opposed. And John C. Calhoun was in the book where slavery was defended. He said, God created the diversity among trees and among animals, and he created it among human beings, and some were meant to be better than others. He created a theology, and actually sold it to people who were benefiting financially from slavery. And actually, Jesus jumps on that when he says that you cannot serve two gods. And he named them. One of them, he represented himself, the God of compassion, love, inclusiveness, and he stopped people from stoning a woman who was caught in adultery while the man didn't even come up in the discussion. You can't be caught in adultery by yourself. So where is this cat? That showed the depth of the one-sidedness in that culture, and he challenged that group of so-called religious leaders with rocks in their hand, big as softballs, standing around this woman, ready to cast that rock on her head, and you could see the blood spilling out of it. He had to stand against them and said, who among you hadn't done something wrong? And then he got down on the ground and started scribbling. Nobody knew what he wrote. He might not wrote anything. But when he stood up, he said, if anybody here hasn't done anything wrong in your life, you have my permission to throw the rock. And the rocks started dropping. And after a while, it was a pile of rocks. And there was the trembling sister on the ground. And he bent down, took her by the hand. He opposed the law, which was that any woman caught in adultery could be stoned. Don't go by the law. There's a higher law. And that is the dignity and worth of all of God's children, including this woman, who probably was poor and manipulated and used and all of this, while the men were running around getting off in more ways than one, and not held responsible for it. So I think we got to reinterpret the gospel. There isn't but one gospel. The rest of it is fraudulent. I didn't mean to stand up.
That's all right. Do your thing. And so, Kristen, I get asked that question a lot. I don't see a separation. And growing up in Richmond, Virginia, for those of you who know, the capital of the Confederacy, as a little colored girl, late 40s, 50s. Don't
worry about that.
I'm not, thank you. at First Baptist Church, the pastor there, Reverend Ransom, basically preached the social gospel. Now, I didn't know that. That's what it was. It was just church, in Sunday school. So the preaching about the children of Israel and all this kind of stuff. So that was us. So everything I did, Girl Scouting, integrating schools, all that was related to what you're supposed to do. And my family was uneducated, as people say. That means they were not certified by any system, but wise, and I thank God for them and pouring it into me. So there's not a real separation. But when you get tired, sit down, serve it. That song comes up. Well, I don't feel no ways tired, come too far from where I started from. And just, if you're in community, there's space to rest. We were moving around with a current initiative, the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation process in North Carolina, and a younger person in Asheville raised us like, y'all just doing so much, wow, and by the grace of God. And when do you do self-care? It's like, yeah, at least somebody's taking care of us that we're 75 and 79 and looking for another year to be the Lord's will.
On my 80th trip around the sun.
Yes, And, but I challenge those young folk, and maybe to you as well. You do need self-care. You do need that. But what do you define as self-care? I'm so afraid that what I see a lot of times is folk being lured into the capitalist view of rest or vacation. You have to have, what's the word? The destination vacation and the destination wedding and and I'm not against any of those things if you are so moved to do them and can afford to do them without impoverishing yourself and those around you to do it. But we have this view that unless we get away from everybody and do this and do that, that we're not having a break. Now, yeah, take a break. I turned my phone off a few minutes ago, so we could be in conversation with you. But we are anti-community in a lot of things we do. And who benefits? Those who are gaining the money from those big tours. We've been on a couple of family cruises. So again, I'm not bashing the particular activity you might engage in. But we do things that make us think that the very people who give us life and strength are also the problem. So it's like, I just need to be away from these people. They're about to worry me to natural death. And they probably are getting on your last nerve and all that. You just have to go to your home or go with some of your girlfriends or do some things. My husband loves sports, anything moving on TV, including, well, I won't get into all his personal life, but he just likes sports. And that's fine. I like love stories. So we just look at TV, or either have more than one, in different rooms and do our relaxation. And the biggest source of joy for me is our family, our daughters and our grandchildren and then brothers and sisters and all that. But knowing when to take that rest, for sure. But don't think the rest has got to be further abuse of yourself and others. And I know that overly taking pills and all that kind of stuff is a big problem because people are trying to escape from ourselves. We are the source of our lives and our power. So we've got to figure out how to resolve contradictions among us because they are there and they are deep. But we have to do that. We can do that with the right spirit of appreciation and respect for one another. And some of those tensions really will be less. We're typical old black folks, so the hypertension and the diabetes, and we take our portion of pills and whatever at this point in time. But still just caring for yourself as you care for your neighbor. That is a source of your strength, as opposed to going off somewhere else where you'll just be further exploited.
Any other questions?
Hey there.
Hey.
So, piggybacking off of that question and the response that it generated, I'm a queer and trans person, and I see in so much of my community the amount of trauma that's been created around religion by people that use their spirituality as an excuse for their hatred and their hatred.
Yes, yes.
How do you handle rebuilding trust with the perspective of social justice through spirituality with those who hold a lot of trauma related to the actions or the words that have been said with the excuse of spirituality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You want to start? You want me to start? Thanks for that question. And I am, as much as I'm able to be, as a cis woman, so I may be missing some things, I'm aware of that. But authenticity is the best way of being for me so that I can relate to you as a fellow human being. As you were here when I mentioned earlier that spirit is the depth of human to human as opposed to religious constructs that say, you know, you're damned forever, I am too because of whatever I've done, that type of thing. Again, building community relationships. I was, my first deep awareness of how destructive the gender discriminations are came from a cousin whom I love dearly. Beautiful Black woman, powerful singer, you know, gospel singer. I'm into gospel music and stuff. Don't say that, well, y'all heard that already, but I like it, you know, it fills me. And I learned after she killed herself that she was a lesbian woman. As to whether she ever practiced or I don't know. I just was oblivious. I didn't know. And I learned that this is why she killed herself, because I couldn't understand what was going on. She was just an everyday person, but sang well and had a group she went around with, had gotten married, all of that, but could not live with that contradiction that she felt inside of herself. And it just pained the family. And I just said, okay, something up with this, because I knew her. And I said, something's going on that I'm not aware of. So I began seeking. Another time I heard a white male who was born to a Methodist pastor, and he was basically banned from the house, the whole kind of thing people have been through, and just listening to his story. So I began to open up to this question. And then the final story I'll just tell is that I had the privilege of meeting with the leaders of Black Lives Matter. I think it was about 2015, most of whom were women. And we went to a hotel in Florida, somebody gave us a few, I think Ms. Magazine gave us a few dollars. It was like the elders with the middlers and the younger, about how do we survive this movement and share anything. This question came up deeply. We reached a spiritual place in that room that was so fulfilling. We realized that us accepting our essential sameness, even in our differences, and recognizing we were striving against the same big tree of oppression. You working on the root called gender bias, I'm working on the root, maybe the limb, I should say, of racism or economic injustice, but we have to all go at the root, or as Dr. Barber says, the root. You know, speaking from the root, you know, there's a whole story to that too. But, so yeah, the church has done much. But again, we said we embrace the church as we try to make the church come to its fullness, but we're led by that spirit that receives you as a fellow human being and working toward it. Do you want to add anything to that?
Just very quickly. I don't think you necessarily have to lead that. There are different people who are socially located and who may be more positioned to lead that. Encourage them if that causes you too much pain. We were in a meeting in Raleigh. We went around the state holding meetings in towns and country places around truth and reconciliation. And we were in Raleigh, and one friend of mine, been knowing him for 50 years. He said, Nelson, do you really think these white races going to change? And I thought about it for a minute, and my answer was, I believe they have the potential to change. I may not be the ingredient that activates that potential, but if I give up on the potential, they become my permanent enemy. And then we are pitted against each other, which is the current direction of the nation. It's pitting one group of people against another group of people over and over again. And if you buy that, your existence almost depends on their non-existence. That's a tragic place for a nation to be. So while I might not be able to, I remember this one story about our girls were very small. We had 2 daughters. And we stopped at a service station because we were low on gas and they needed to go to the bathroom. And the owner of the service station came out and said, leave, because apparently we had violated his personal policies of using the bathroom. I said, I can't leave. My girls are there. I'm not leaving, He backed off. But when I drove away, I doubted if I would be the person that could help him find a place of transformation. But I didn't disbelieve that there was such a place. And at the point that we get to believing that certain people are inherently not fully human, which is the way slavery was justified, that we're in a deeply flawed and tragic place. We can't do everything with everybody, but everybody has the potential to change. And you don't have to be responsible for making that happen.
Is there anybody else, any other questions?
Hi, Reverend and Mrs. Johnson. As a new community organizer and environmentalist and agitator, I would just ask you, what one thing would you have to say to me as I embark on the work in my community that is very racially divided and biased in terms of Black women leaders?
Anita, believe what I already know, that you have within yourself the power, the capability. What you don't have, you will learn as you go. And go for it. Believe. If we don't have belief, we can't go. And we're strengthened when we have a vision that is inclusive of certainly what you are dealing with, but with others, even those who seem to be opposing you, not seem to be, are opposing you, that the larger vision that we call beloved community will provide a basis for you to overcome those things. So that's part of why we came to your community with our truth, justice, and reconciliation work. Hopefully we'll be to visit some other communities in North Carolina in particular, to put that vision, that hope, that possibility in the hearts and minds of everybody who's willing to listen. It won't be everybody who grabs onto it, but start with those who are ready. And you'd be just amazed at the difference. The story we quote a lot is A&T 4, that just turned into waves and waves of people in the 60s. There were always people doing work, just the singular work that people like Fannie Lou Hamer, Dolores Ford, to others have done that drew others. So believe in Anita and that power that made and sustains Anita to make the difference. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I just want to, I know we're running out of time. I get preachery, so forgive me when I stand up, I get a little animated. But I think one of the things that will be helpful, and again, everything is not for everybody, but if everybody get a hold to something, we can make something new happen. I want to suggest that we learn to listen deeply to the people who oppose us, and not think so much in winning an argument as to winning a person. There is a difference. There's tit for tat, this for that, you know. It's almost like sports, putting spin moves on people. But what is driving this person internally? You almost want to feel it. And you may not respond to it right then. You may sit with it for a while and leave the space to come back. We have a culture now that is throwing verbal grenades into each other's camp every day. We can't imitate that. We can't imitate that. We have to find a way to feel each other as much as we can, and then to respond with some substance. If I ask somebody in here to just look up, don't look nowhere else, and tell me what you see, they would describe what they see up there. If I ask somebody else to look this way and tell me what you see, they would be in the same room, but they would be seeing different things because they have different perspectives. And people have grown up in different families, different pieces of culture, and they see different things. Well, if you think the only thing that this room looks like is a black ceiling with a bunch of lights, that's not true. But if you think the only thing this room looks like is 3 windows with some blinds closed, that's not true. How do we help these pieces of perspective lose their absoluteness and to begin to blend together a picture of humanity that's not built on one perspective, but appreciating all the perspective as long as they are rooted in the dignity, the worth, and the enormous unrealized potential of all of us children.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Maybe you working with Latinx and African American Black communities, you are aware of that bias and the hate that has created among these groups. And when they are together, they kill each other. And we cannot support us sometimes. This is a great space where we are here together. But I know in other cities, we kill each other. What can you tell us about that? You already mentioned some strategies, but have done any more work around this in this part of the country? Well, besides that, you help us a lot with the farm workers.
There are many examples, and I'll try to start with one, and we can go back and forth. But you name a particular problem that, given the way the demographics in our state in particular are evolving, is something that we must addressed head on. But again, with the belief that as we come to know one another, know what we're really working with, we have, again, that power, that potential to make a change, not just for the Black and brown communities, but for all of our communities. Nelson mentioned in 2008, we had a Black and brown, what do we call it, unity conference or something?
Yeah, growing out of the Smithfield situation, where 500 Black, 500 white. We had this green.
Black and brown, maybe, I think.
Yeah, that's right, Black and brown.
And a few white
people
in a rural
can't tell the
area.
difference sometimes.
Yeah, and so we, and then with the street group we talked about was mainly Latino, so that kind of bred a lot of stuff too, you know, and the economy was shifting at that point. So I remember Nelson talking to some folks one time, and they said, "Here we go again." You know, Black folk always push back. A new immigrant group comes in, and then all of a sudden, you know, we work together on this to bring about unity, but then we get left behind. So we had to do a lot of teaching, and particularly among very educated folk. You know, because, you know, there's education, then there's education. So the people's education. So what we've done is really to have those intimate conversations, hear some of the things that we tend to say and do to one another, but mainly try to craft out something we can work on together. In the course of doing that, we find that we have more unity than disunity. And we also rely on the cultural strengths. When there was an education struggle in Greensboro at one point, where, you know, there are these, the parent handbooks and what have you, the school system was not consciously providing these handbooks in Spanish so that parents could really be involved in, you know, the well-being of their children. So I had a former student I used to teach at A&T who was an assistant principal. So reached out to him and said, why don't we get some Latino and Black parents together along with teachers and work this thing out. But we did it by having the children, some of y'all been to Beloved, there's a basketball court, there's also a parking lot, you know, so the children share games. What are the games you play? Those who cooked, mainly the women, shared meals. And so we had, just did a combination of a cultural thing and also a deep political piece. It got unity at that meeting that all of the handbooks and what have you would be produced in both Spanish and English. And then there's some people in our communities that don't read well, period. I don't care what you put it in. So we've got to then make the circles ready so people can do that. So we've done things like that. What we are still weak on is actually preparing the materials ourselves sometimes. So we're actively working with one of my former co-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign, Anna Elraza Blackburn, in getting things translated, just making it, when you make people know that they're welcome by calling their name or having things similar to what, it makes a tremendous difference. You know, I know a little bit of Spanish from 4th grade. So when I go to a store or whatever, restaurant, whatever, I will at least say, buenos dias, como está, you know, whatever. I know I was part of that Sputnik crowd that learned a lot of languages we were behind in this country. So I just do those little things, but really knowing that at the root we're the same, and respecting you accordingly, it usually comes back to us. But mainly, I found working on common problems, looking toward positive solutions. So we're not looking at each other as a problem, because that's the big setup. You know, males versus females, straight versus, you know, LGBTQ, you know, all that's the setup. And if we avoid that setup, it's amazing what we can do. Right, I think that. You don't have to.
I was thinking of when we were working with the Smithfield workers, we decided to hold a school a few miles from that big plant in Tar Heel. I didn't know there was another Tar Heel in North Carolina. And I've been talking to a Baptist minister in Raleigh who said, Johnson, every time a new group comes, they get in front of us. He says, so I don't know if I can just join this. But he came, and a mother came, and she told the story of her son who worked at that plant. And he was working a dangerous job and fell in a hot vat of grease, and there he died. All the time, you can't just intellectually convince somebody. So do your best, but don't necessarily think you're going to convince everybody. But there are moments. This pastor stood up and said that I actually want to change my position. I didn't say a word to him. He felt this mother, tears running down her face, how precious her son was to her and how precious she became to him. So how can I not support the struggle for her children? And he didn't say this, but she is more likely to support the struggle for your children. And in that way, we overcome the historical ditches of division as we learn to walk toward each other, believe in each other, even against a cultural disbelief.
I know it's one a little after one right now. We have to wrap up, but I want to say, do y'all have any last words you want to share with us?
We're good.
Just thanks for the opportunity. This has been meaningful to us.
Good talk.
And thanks to everyone for this wonderful weekend of our members gathering us today. I just want to say that it's been inspiring to share so much wonderful space with all of you. Welcome to the Bull City. And you know, I'm looking forward to all the inspiration from the weekend and continued conversations, new relationships, new ideas, new spaces to think about the world that we want to build next, and new spaces to struggle and to be in conversation with each other, and to embrace our differences, embrace our contradictions, engage new lenses, right, on how we approach the conditions that are affecting our people, that we go to work for every day, that are not in this room. And so I'm extremely inspired. I'm going to take some time after this for sure. I know everyone else should as well. And let all of this settle down. Just again, thank you all for being a part of this, historic AMG. We will be having all of these panels, all the trainings as a part of the digital archive, so that we can continue to build on these conversations, and we can kind of create a kind of trail of the work that we're doing. I think it's very important. It's iconic, in particular for the South. And I'm just happy to be, again, just today and yesterday in community and relationship with such powerful folks that I know together we're going to win. And we're going to take the risks, and we're going to have the faith necessary to take those risks to win the fights that we got to win. So thank you all so much for the time today.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you again for being here.
Thank you all so much for coming out. So I wanted to give more time, but they cut down on our time till we have the space. So my team is going to come around, help everyone, clear their tables and all of that. But we have about 15 minutes until we have to be out of this space. So we can hang out outside. We can socialize on the patio, the chairs, all of that stuff out there. But just wanted to put that out there. All right, thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, this was special.